G'day, Mike again, and in this module we're going to walk through the Data Studio interface just to get familiar with what all of the various components are. When you open Data Studio, this is the home page that you're going to land in. You've got a couple of options here. You've got that blank top left of your screen here. You've got a blank report that you can start with. Absolutely no problem starting there. Or you might want to start with one of the template reports that Google provide. And if you do a Google search, you'll find a few others. But that AdWords overview there, top right, assuming you're doing an AdWords report, maybe you want to start there. That's a nice sort of fairly simple bunch of metrics on one page, good enough to get you started. In a later module, somewhere in the course resources, you'll find a link to a couple that I've created that you can use as a starting point as well. So not a whole lot to do on here. You can search through your previous reports. You can see here all of the reports that you've looked at recently. You'll also notice there bottom left, this is the reports screen. There is a data sources screen there as well. So you can sort of go in there, rename your data sources, add new data sources, remove old ones that you don't need, etc. And a link to Google's video tutorials down there. So if you want to sort of double up on your training and have a look at some of Google's stuff to help supplement this course, there's the link for that. Speaking of Google, they have I think this is about a 7-page or so dashboard. Again, check out the resources in the Agency Savvy members area. It'll be somewhere near this video if you're watching this in Agency Savvy. There'll be a link to this, and this is a really good place to start. They have, as you can see across here, a whole bunch of numbered steps and these little post-it notes stuck on here to get you to do this. So rather than try and create this from scratch, let's just use that. Google have done a bit of thinking here. It's a really good learning tool of what's possible with a dashboard. So I'll link to that and you can dive straight into that. If you can't find the link, just Google Data Studio Google Training Dashboard and I'm sure you'll find it. So there are a few levels. So just to get sort of some of the terminology out of the way, a report level is obviously the whole thing. The report is the entire document, which is made up of various pages. And you can have, we're going to get into things like date filters later on. So you can have a date range that's on the front page. And if you choose, let's say, last 30 days there, you can set it so that all of the data through the entire report will change based on that date that you've picked. And that you can have that date picker up in the top right. This is what we typically do. That date picker is in the top right of every single page. And no matter where you change it, it changes the data through the entire report. Now you can, if you want to, you can override that and have certain things affect just the page level. So it affects all of the elements on that particular page. So for instance, I've got a page, and I'll show you this later in a later module, a page where I look at monthly results over the past year. And so I overwrite that particular page and say, use this particular date range just for this page. For the rest of the report, keep using that report level date. Component level is just referring to a chart, a control, a shape, a text box, all of those components, the bits, the elements that make up your pages. And then you can group multiple elements together into groups. And so then, depending on the various things you combine, you can change the properties of those together sometimes. But you can just group stuff together so you can move them around more easily. If you're familiar with, I don't know, Keynote or PowerPoint, you're probably pretty used to this concept of just dragging and or control clicking, putting multiple things together and then grouping them so you can move them around together. And then all of those different things have properties, and we're going to dig into the properties as we go, the properties for the different types of charts, for styling the charts, and the properties for the pages in general. So this is the navbar that you'll see across the top of the screen. Over on the far left, we've got a page picker, and I'll show you a couple of ways that you can use that. Redo, undo, and so on. A whole bunch of chart tools in the middle there, 9 currently. That's going to get you pretty much everything that you want. There aren't the super duper funky stuff that you'll find if you're familiar with D3 and a bunch of JavaScript tools, things like the SAN key chart, which is one of my favorites to use, but Not in here yet, who knows, maybe one day, but all of the main things that you're going to need, certainly enough to make a report look gorgeous and understandable by a wide range of people. You've got some little text and image things here which you can use just to draw attention to things, to label stuff, to make your reports look beautiful. I'll show you a couple of examples of that as we go, so you can have a full screen image behind your report and fade it out into the background if you want. You can put text labels over the top and then use shapes or blocks of color to draw attention to certain areas. And then a couple of slightly more advanced tools, but we'll cover this in a later module, the date picker and the filter control. Very, very useful. We'll get to those. And then just lastly for this module, at a high level, when we're talking about just the report in general, so before we even add a chart, we've got some options here on the left for laying out our chart. So I'll walk through those for you, and then various themes. Kind of simple at this point in time. There's really very little that you're going to need to change when it comes to the theme. You can pretty much go light or dark. You can, if you want to, dive in there, change fonts and so on. As you can see, your chart palette, the background and so on. Most of the time though, you'll be fine leaving that as is, certainly for your first couple. On the layout side over on the left, the header visibility is just the little row across the top, where you've got the view edit button, where you've got the little share, this report icon. If you choose to make that auto hide, it just slides up towards the top of the page. So don't change this for your first 2 or 3 reports, but once you get familiar with it, I think it's quite nice to have that auto hide feature on. It just slides that out of the way and lets the client focus on the numbers. The nav position, you don't need to worry about until you've got multiple pages, but if you've got a report, and I'll show you one of these later too, where you might have, let's say half a dozen or even a dozen pages, I like choosing that left nav position, which puts all of the list of pages down the left hand side, which can be slid out of the way, can be hidden off to the side. But I just think that's easier, particularly for clients to use, rather than constantly going up to the page picker up at the top and having to click on that, find down the list and then click again. So just minimizing friction for them. Actual size or fit to width, I think given a lot of people have got some pretty wide screens these days, I've been keeping this to actual size so that the report doesn't go huge as soon as they open up their browser. That's the default, and then you can change the canvas size. The default at this point is 4 by 3. I think 16 by 9 is probably a better, given that people are going to look at this on their screen. I'll talk about printing things out later. It's actually quite difficult to print one of these out. It's not designed to be printed. It's designed to be viewed on a screen. Therefore, I think widescreen is a much better option. So we're changing that default canvas size to 16 by 9 for all of our reports. So probably good to do that right at the beginning, because it's a real pain having to do that afterwards. And you really don't need to worry about the report level component position. That's going to just be a bit too confusing if we talk about that now. So we'll leave that for now.